Y'all, we have a panel coming up for everyone. This panel will be hosted by the wonderful Dani Dee, who is the lead developer of High Elo Girls, where they will be joined by a series of other game devs where they discuss about how the relationships created in the games they've developed help explore themes of existentialism, self-actualization, and the evolution of one's identity. So without further ado, let us welcome this panel.
Hi and welcome. Thanks for tuning into our talk, Black Narradevs, Exploring Relationships in a World of Our Own. Today, we'll be talking about who we are, what we do and why we do it, and how anyone watching can get started despite the very real barriers that are, unfortunately, in place for developers like us. But before we jump into the meaty stuff, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. So my name is Dani Dee, and I'm the host for today's panel. I'm the founder of Split Fate Studios, a tiny media studio with a big agenda, focused on all things speculative and subcultural in games that feature LGBTQ+ and POC characters at the helm. I am currently working on High Elo Girls, an inclusive esports visual novel in which you play as the latest recruit of an all-girls esports team. So Dani, I'm going to call on you next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dani Lalonders. I am the lead producer of Validate Struggling Singles in Your Area. I am also a writer and a community manager of that game. I have been doing games for like 3 years, and I'm excited to talk about my journey.
Excellent. And next we have Geneva.
Hi, my name's Geneva. I am the lead developer for Skate and Date, this roller derby rhythm game dating sim. And I just want to make more games with Black and queer joy. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. And then finally, we have Owl.
Hi, I'm Owl, also known by my government name, which is Jacinia. I've been making games for about 5 years with an emphasis on Black and Indigenous POC and relationships in sci-fi and fantasy spaces under a visual novel development group called Jellyfish Parade. Currently, I'm working on Belle Automata, which is a reverse harem sci-fi otome game. I wear a lot of hats, so I'm lead developer, writer, musician, or composer, and a lot in between, but yeah, that's basically Jellyfish Parade and me.
Nice. Yeah. That sounds very, very indie game developer. So thanks for taking the time to introduce yourselves. So really, despite the fact that we're all Black indie developers of marginalized genders making narrative intensive games that prioritize intimacy and relationships, as you can hear, we're all telling some pretty different stories set in very different worlds. And that's actually one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to bring us together to have a chat. So often when you start talking about games created by people of marginalized backgrounds, a number of barriers pop up that often aren't there for people of dominant ethnic, gender, religious, and or sexual identities. Some of these barriers are purely material, meaning you may just not have the funding to pay for the very real labor and technology costs of making something like a game, while other challenges might revolve around access to the right people. And by right people, I mean the sort of people who are there to support you, to believe in you, to help you learn, and also to give you room to make mistakes without tanking your career. Now, these barriers contribute to the very disappointing fact that post the summer of 2020, when there was an outpouring of corporate and studio support for Black developers due to the George Floyd protests, Black devs remain vastly underrepresented in the gaming industry, and the numbers are stark. So according to an IGDA 2021 developer satisfaction survey, Black devs make up only 4% of the industry, and this stat does not, to my knowledge anyway, account for gender or sexual diversity, meaning we aren't exactly sure how many of us are women, trans, some variation of gender nonconforming, and we also don't know how many are gay, bisexual, asexual, etc. But before this panel becomes the Dani Dee ranting show, I want to get each of your perspectives on why you decided to jump into game development, knowing even intuitively that the odds are stacked against us. So why games? Why not graphic novels or traditional books or films? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call on some of you. I'm going to go for Dani. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, of course. I decided that I wanted to make games because games are hard. And games are something that's always been very personal to me. One of my first games I've ever played was Lizzie McGuire on the go on the Game Boy Advance. And ever since I was younger, I just wanted to see myself in a game because yes, like I grew up in an age where Black television was very much a thing, even though it no longer is. I'm not sure what happened, but I grew up with Proud Family, That's So Raven, like a bunch of Black shows. So I saw myself in shows, but I never saw myself in games. And this has been an issue I've always had as a gamer. I didn't start seeing myself in games until very recently, where people decided, hey, maybe we should start putting Black women in games. I actually wanted to I used to be into a really big FPS that notoriously put multiple animals and mechs in their games before they put a Black woman. Very strange. But now that I saw that, I was like, okay, I can actually just do the change that I want to see in this world. So I made Validate. Validate is a game where you can play as multiple Black women throughout our multiple volumes, and I just am really happy. I hope that Validate changes how people see games and how people make games.
That's awesome. Yeah, very much on the same page with you. So now I'm actually going to call out Jen because I want to hear your perspective.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of weird because for a long time I thought I was going to just be in the animation industry because I just grew up being more so an artist and didn't think that making games at home was a thing I could do until I ended up going to after school programs in high school that taught me how to make games and taught me, hey, there's a lot of free game engines out there that you can use and you don't have to pay a bunch of money. So it's that, and then growing up, gaming has been just a big thing in my family. My parents would play Tekken from time to time. The first game that I've played was the Lilo and Stitch sandwich stacker because my dad let me use his computer. But yeah, I feel like it's growing up with games, wanting to also just see more, for example, Black lesbians in games, because there's barely any Black lesbians in shows either. And it's really frustrating to have to kind of just pick out and be where can I find this content? But just figuring out there's communities out there where it's yeah, no, just make what you want, and supporting each other is really nice. And also spite. I feel like I'm staying in the games industry out of spite because as someone who's just graduated from college, doing game design, I'm wow, there's not a lot of entry level or junior jobs for people coming right out of college. It's frustrating, but I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna I want this industry to be better for people like us. So yeah.
Yep. I mean, right on the money. Owl, I'm just gonna round it off with you too, because I feel like you've also got some really awesome insight into this.
So I wanted to make games that connected with my audience. I didn't know what my audience was, but I was sure that there were people who felt like me, where they love playing Otome games, but just felt so underrepresented. And yes, most of the time it's because Otome games come from a very homogenous country, so as a genre, they don't tend to be diverse. But I always felt that, especially in the indie otome spaces, there was a lack of diversity there where people were just trying to make their own versions of the same games that I was already seeing. And that really frustrated me. I wanted to make games that represented the world that I saw around me. I grew up in a very diverse family in a very diverse area. I'm from West Philly, if you guys didn't know that, which is a super Black area. And when you wake up and everyone you see looks like you, and then you turn on the TV and don't feel the same way, or you start playing games or doing anything, taking in media, and it doesn't reflect you, you get frustrated. And I felt frustrated. So I wanted to make games that represented the world that I saw around me, but also could connect with people on a personal level. And I chose games in particular because um, I feel that a little bit of it is spite as well. That feeling that like, well, if you guys aren't gonna do it, I'm gonna do it myself. Because you often hear that. You hear, well, if you don't like it, just go make your own game. And a lot of times they say that with the idea that you couldn't ever do that, but actually you can. All of us can. And so I felt I felt that not pressure because it wasn't like I was forced into it, but I felt that like it lit a fire under me to want to be able to do it. So that's why I chose games. That's what I wanted.
Yep. I mean, it's funny because I honestly, I'm echoing all of you because I really do also believe in the power of spite as like a very, very strong motivator. When I was younger, my first serious games were the Mortal Kombat series, which I definitely started playing them way early than I should have. I shouldn't have been. I shouldn't have been like 10, like 10, oh my God, 10 a.m. I shouldn't have been like 10 years old, playing this super, super bloody game. But, I was at first drawn to the women characters because they were really cool, really badass. And then I don't remember which game it was. It came after Mortal Kombat 2, but they kind of became known for having palette swap ninjas. Like I think Melina and Katana were like palette swaps of each other. Basically, they were female characters who were only differentiated by the color of their outfit, because it was basically the same asset. It was just in a different color. And then they introduced Jade, who over the course of the series has been like nebulously brown. Like in some games, she's been brown. She's, been clearly, I think, black. In terms of like her facial features. She's been like lighter shades of brown to darker shades of brown. But then also she has been like Asian, and sometimes she's been like a darker skinned Asian. So it's like with Jade, she came in, but like I started to identify with her, and at the same time I couldn't really, because like it wasn't very apparent that she was intentionally a black, female character. So yeah, I mean, since I was young, I've been playing games, and I've been identifying with characters who didn't necessarily reflect my own experience. And that's all well and good. But I also was just kind of like, we can try to do something about this. So I would definitely agree with spite being, if not the reason that I got in, it's definitely the reason I'm staying around, or if not the only reason, but it's definitely a powerful one. So yeah, thank you so much for just sort of getting us started talking about the why. And I feel like now it's actually a really good time to jump into the how. So again, we're all making narrative games with heavy emphasis on relationship exploration. And a pointed question that I wanted to ask each of you is, how do you approach designing each of your games? I put together a very loose game dev pipeline that's showing on our current slide. And I feel like it's general enough to describe how we start making our games, but beyond, coming up with a story, and then there's just like pain and suffering for the whole production process. I'm really curious to know, what game dev engines you're using, how you're scripting your stories, and how you settled on your relationship-based design approaches. So who wants to tackle this question first?
I'll go for it. So I mentioned already that I wear a lot of hats, so this is a little bit of an intensive process for me. But the first thing that I do is figure out the premise, which usually tends to be like a basic one sentence long idea. So one project that I'm working on secretly, it's my first time really mentioning it in public, is a botanist specializing in poisonous plants is sacrificed to the Nightshade King, ruler of poisonous flora. So this is just a general idea of what's going on. I don't know what it's going to be called yet, but then the first character I create after I have my premise is the heroine, since I usually tend to work in Otome games. I choose whether she's physically customizable, whether her personality is customizable, and once I choose those aspects, then I can figure out how she interacts with the world around her, namely the love interest. Now, love interests are more complicated, but I usually tend to pick three. I like to pick personalities that will clash or complement the main characters, either for a fun or just like a cute and sappy dynamic. It really just depends on what I'm feeling. But as long as the dynamic is interesting, I tend to go with it. Then, after I figured out the main character and the people that she'll fall in love with, I usually go with figuring out plot outlines. Like that part is pretty straightforward. You have the premise, you have the characters, so next is to figure out what will happen to them. And that tends to come a little bit more naturally for me. If it doesn't and you're burnt out, you can always hire like an outliner or have even just a friend that you bounce ideas with.
Mm,
But yeah, it's an important part of the process to figure out what's going to happen from beginning to end before I commission any assets or even think about like getting artwork or anything done. And I know someone's gonna ask like, well, what about tools? Because there's so many tools.
yeah.
I want you to
Yep.
know that I am. Hmm? Oh, sorry, that's someone was saying something. Sorry. Um, I'm super chaotic. So I use on my computer, I use Apple Notes. On my phone, I use Google Keep. And then when I'm at home, I tend to use pen and paper, like sticky notes. And then I
Mhm.
rearrange the sticky notes to figure out the plots and things like that. So I'm pretty analog when it comes to stuff like that. But you can always find, like, if you're more of a digital person, there's things like Twine that you can use to outline. There's all
Yep.
kinds of different softwares. So then with outlining comes the side characters. I usually have as many as needed, not wanted to tell the story because I tend to bare minimum with them since artwork costs money. And that's basically my process for creating a visual novel. Other miscellaneous things I write and program at the same time, and I make the music. So I usually make as many tracks as I need to tell the story. Um, yeah, so if I forgot anything, let me know. But
That is so powerful. It's just, it's wild the amount of work that you do to bring something to life. Um, so I did want to get what game development engine are you using?
oh, sorry. I use RunPy, which I think is really helpful if you are not particularly programming savvy. I hate programming. It is not something I enjoy doing, but it is
Mm.
a necessary evil in the game development industry. So yeah, using it something where it's not really complicated to figure out, and there are a lot of resources out there. They even have a forum that you can ask questions on. So
Mhm.
if you need help, then you can ask for it readily and it will be provided. So RenPy is
That's
great.
awesome. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
super helpful. Like RenPy, I know is a pretty common visual novel engine, but it's yeah, like it's just really nice to bring that up because I feel like it might be one of the lesser known just general game engines. Like you can do a lot of cool stuff in RenPy. But I'm gonna leave that for now. And actually, I'm gonna ask who wants to go next.
I
Because I'm
would
gonna
go
make you talk.
next.
Okay, go for it.
Because Validate was originally in RenPy when we first started, when we had our Kickstarter and everything. If you played our original demo, you know it's in RenPy. But we definitely just changed it up to Unity because yes, RenPy is great, but Validate is a damn big ass game.
Yeah.
And it's just like finding a Unity programmer is a lot easier than finding a RenPy programmer.
Mm.
So that being said, let's talk about Validate's narrative process. I'm the lead producer, so I just oversee everything. We kind of run ourselves like a AAA studio in a way where we have departments, because usually for indie, everyone on the team is doing everything. While for us, we really do have our departments. We have our programmers, artists, writers, and then we have our music man. He does everything music wise. And then you have myself who just monitors everything. Like I said, I'm also a writer. I wrote Malik's routes in Validate. Also Stand Validate. I think it should be out by the time this plays. So if it is, go buy that game. It's really good.
Yes.
So yeah, I write validates. So what we did when we first wanted to make our game is that we really had to have a talk and be like, okay, what happens if you put a Popeyes manager who is a SoundCloud rapper and a marriage counselor who does not believe in love in the same room together? Will they kiss? Will they fight? Like, what's gonna happen? And we really wanted to just like explore what it's like for everyday people to like, you know, meet and fall in love. We wanted to do the ultimate meet cute, but like not your cheesy typical meet cute, like your coffee shops. Yes, we have our coffee shops, but whatever. But we want to do things like, you know, what if you meet the love of your life at a CVS pharmacy? Or what if you meet the love of your life at a lesbian nightclub? So we really want to explore what happens if you just put your everyday people in a room together. So we really just had a talk, like my whole writer team, we had a talk, we just planned all of our routes out from the beginning. I think that the most important thing is to plan your routes or plan your writing, have guidelines, because so many times you will hit a wall in development if you just do not plan correctly. And also planning, like Owl said, really helps with knowing what art assets you need, what songs you need, what programming you need to do, like just to make sure everything is set. Writing your narrative process is the most important process of your game, besides, you know, general organization. But like narrative organization will make or break your game. And I think so many people just don't really pay attention to the writing of game. But like if your game plays well, yes. But if your game doesn't make sense, people will remember that. So I think it's really important to make sure you are, like, if you're working with a team, make sure you guys are all on the same page. If you're working by yourself, make sure you are on the same page as yourself. Make sure you're writing things down, you're being very organized. And then if you're struggling, ask for help. There's been so many times where I've literally messaged Dee and been like, hey, can you read this for me to see if this makes sense? Like, it's okay to ask for help and ask people who are like also writers, but also non-writers. You never know. Someone might give you the most valuable advice in the world and they've never written a single thing in their life.
Yeah. Oh man, I know, right? Well, so I mean, that's great because we have Owl over here who's like, I do everything. Because you are just multi-talented that way, like even just composing your music, that's wild. And then, you know, Dani is emphasizing actually like stretch that out across many people, and sort of like trust them to be able to pull their weight and do their jobs. So Jen, do you want to talk a little bit about your process?
Yeah, so I feel like my process really depends on like the game I'm working on. Like I feel like a lot of the times I'll start out with like an idea or a mock-up or like a character that I keep just like thinking about. But specifically with Skate and Date, it started off as a game jam and also with characters that I just kept going back and forth with, being like, oh, I always wanted just like I feel like a lot of rhythm games don't really have storylines, and the ones that do, like, I like them, they're great, but I'm like, what if we sprinkle lesbians in them? So that's kind of just how Skate and Date originally started. I was just like, I'm just gonna make a game that I actually want to make. I mean, that I actually would want to play when I was younger. But rhythm games are really hard, and I'm a person who kind of does everything. I've learned the hard way that it's like, yeah, I do need to like actually have other people help me. Like I wasn't ever really afraid to ask for help. But because when I started making this game in high school, since then I was like really just like a solo developer. I was like stubborn and I was like, this needs to be like my first big solo game. And I've never written a story like this big. Like it's like over 100,000 words, and it's just like, oh my God. But really with Skate and Date, what I wanted to think about is how to actually tie in the rhythm game aspects with the story elements. Because instead of like kind of having a character that you can just fill yourself into like a blank slate, like I have this like fleshed out Black high schooler who has like all of these like struggling emotions that high schoolers have, but like I wanted to play around with the idea that, you know, instead of having like the good end and the bad end and like what's right and wrong for like emotions wise, it's just like they're just like basically different universes. It's like the idea where people are like, oh, I'll love you in every universe. It's like kind of trying to explore that idea, but in just like a cute game about high schoolers who do roller derby. But yeah, I feel like specifically for scripting, I at first was doing it in a whole text file because I just was learning Unity still, but eventually went to Twine and then put everything in a Google Doc so I can actually like ask people for advice. And specifically, there's a lot of like really helpful plugins for Unity. So I've been using Yarn to help with just like getting that narrative stuff in and like good. But yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's just really cool hearing you all talk about your approaches to the games that you're making, because again, they're all quite different, and they're different ways of exploring like intimacy, which I really like. You know, whether it's Skate and Date, which, you know, that focuses on two people and they're sort of like different variations of their relationship and different universes. You know, Owl's going for an otome approach. So you might have like a lead heroine and she's interacting with lots of other different characters, and you see how that goes. And then, you know, you've got Dani, who I know with Validate, you're switching between like you're switching between a lot of different characters. There's no like lead protagonist, so you get to see lots of different perspectives.
Just kidding, Yolanda's the lead because she's the
Oh,
best girl.
yeah, all right. I misspoke. I apologize. Yolanda's the best. And then for something like High Elo Girls, I would actually say it's closer to Owl, in that it's kind of like following a traditional otome way of doing things, when you have like a lead, and then you know, she's got like 5 other possible people that she can get close to over the course of the game. So yeah, it's cool how, you know, that's happened in terms of the similarities, and then like the strong differences that we've got going here. And it's also cool that we've got, you know, 2 games that are being made in RenPy, one that started in RenPy and then moved over to Unity, and then one that's always been in Unity. So yeah, I feel like I don't know, that's cool to me. So thank you for, you know, talking a little bit about your process. I can say that I started as a duo making High Elo Girls, and then I'm not like Dani. I can't like just jump into something and have the confidence to know that I'm going to pull off, you know, something that I think is quite a difficult feat to accomplish, is managing, you know, different departments full of different people. So we've grown from 2 people to about 6. And we're just kind of slowly poking at the typical sort of skills that you might find are needed to make a game. So we've got artists, we've got designers. I'm doing a lot of writing and programming. But yeah, it's cool. There are various ways that you can get started on making a game. So yeah, I think with that said, I think we're actually in a good spot to start closing down the panel. But what I want to do is I want to tackle how anyone watching can actually get started on telling their own stories through games. So do you guys have any recommendations for how to get started?
I do.
Oh yeah, let's go. Let's hear it. I'm ready.
So basically, the way I got started with games is that I wanted to tell a story that's not been told before, and because Validate explores like various themes amongst people of color that are typically just not seen in games. It's sometimes seen in television, but like, you know, games, television, 2 different things. One I can play, one I just watch. So it's just like, I think that if you really want to start making games so you don't feel like you're copying someone, make games and write stories that you've never seen before. Really go outside of the box of normality, and really just do what you want to do and do things that like make you happy. I think that like that is like the most important thing to tell any writer. If you're not getting joy out of your writing, it's going to show. Like it's going to show that you did not have fun writing. It's your quality of your writing is just going to go down. I think to like really be comfortable and be happy with the things that you're putting out is like the most important thing. So 2 things: be happy and write something that has never been written before.
Whew. Oh, I feel like those are tricky, but honestly, if you can really approach it with the confidence, like that's such a key facet, right? Like, Jen and Owl, do you want to speak on it a little bit as well?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can go first.
No, go ahead, Jen.
I guess I was just gonna say, also just like start small, like just make a bunch of like small games. Like it doesn't have to be perfect.
It doesn't have to be Validate.
Because if you start off with like something too big and then you're just going to be stuck working on it for years, and it's like, again, not bad. A lot of game developers have been stuck working on things for years, but like it's okay to just start small. It's okay to just do something with friends And also just like, it's important, I guess, to like also like think about what engine works for you, because if you start with an engine that is going to drive you insane, especially if you don't like programming, because I like programming, not everyone likes programming, it will drive you insane. Like I feel like what I personally think is like Twine is good for writers, like usually RedPie is usually good for artists and also writers. And then like I feel like RPG Maker usually has like sales, like you don't really need a lot of programming and stuff. It's like it's nice, it's cute, but yeah, just like start small, don't stress yourself out, don't overscope. It's very important.
Scope.
Starting with your
That is a
magnum
thing.
opus is definitely the way to get in trouble early on.
Very much.
My advice is pretty simple. First off, make the games that you want to play. If you want to play the game, then you're going to be the number one fan, and that'll be a great motivator for you to continue and actually finish your game. Um, Also, I wanted to say that, what did I want to say? Just, uh, oh, game jams are a great way to get into games.
Yeah.
Usually they're really small. They have different themes, so you can pick a theme that like really resonates with you, and you can make games. There's like Spooktober if you like horror, and they have lots of prizes as well. There's Sinofest, which is like the summer novel festival, which is basically a game themed about summer. There's all kinds of game jams, and you can find them on itch.io or just in other places. If you really want to get started, that's like a great way to start somewhere.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up game jams. Honestly, I should have participated in them a bit more. I've done a couple, but those were amazing like learning experiences, because then you get to pick a skill to focus on and just kind of rely on the rest of your team to pull their weight on that sort of thing. And then you get to learn like collaboration skills and management, because sometimes things don't go the way you want it to, but there's always a way to fix or just kind of keep going forward in ways that don't necessarily end disastrously. So that's a good skill to learn, is how to work with people. Also, for my advice, one thing I would say is reach out to the devs behind the games that you like. So I would say, and well, obviously do it respectfully too. Like don't be in someone's DMs like hounding them for attention. Definitely come with pointed questions that they can spend some time giving some concrete answers to. Don't just be like, I love your game, I want to work with you. No, like if there are things that you want to figure out how to do but you don't know where to start. I've actually been really lucky in that a few years back I reached out to the indie devs behind some visual novels that I really loved, and they were so generous in talking to me. They were just really patient with me. They pointed me in the direction of like the RenPy forums to get very specific questions answered. They pointed me towards some tutorials. So I would say, again, don't be hounding people. Approach people respectfully. But I've found, especially on the indie side of things, people are very willing to share their knowledge. If you come at them authentically and with just like a genuine interest. So
yeah, I agree, because because Validate, it's just like it got way too big. It's got really big. And I also talked to people who make similar games as myself, Western VNs in particular. I've talked to the creators of Dream Daddy. I've talked to the creator of Monster Prom. Very nice people. They told me like so much. You really just do learn from talking to other developers who have done the things that you want to do. And I know like some people may be really scary, but like you never know until you just ask. Like, okay, maybe one person might ignore you. Go on to the next one. You will get the information that you need.
Yeah, that's great. I can't agree with that more. Yeah. So is there anything else we want to talk about? Because unfortunately, I feel like we've got to wind down here. I would say thanks for listening. And again, just it's an honor for me to be on a panel with these lovely people. I'm a big fan of their games, and I'm really looking forward to all the games that are coming out. So with that said, we actually have our official Twitter accounts. on our final thank you slide. So please go ahead and follow Validate at Validate Game. Follow Belle Automata at GelP Parade. Follow my studio at Split Fate, split_fate, and then follow Skate and Date at Skate and Date on Twitter. But yeah, thanks again for tuning in. And if we have nothing else to say, I will actually say have a great rest of your Game Devs of Color Expo conference.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much to our lovely panelists for sharing all their inner thoughts and insights with the rest of us. And in the meantime, did y'all know that Game Devs of Color Expo has a job board where some of our premium sponsors will be listing opportunities? That means sponsors like Microsoft, aka Xbox. So if you haven't already, do take a peek.